so I do a lot of data science. And so, having a test and using that's a great data point you can use to say, are you doing good, doing bad? And I think if you do just program with no kind of assessment or no kind of understanding, you never can really measure what you're doing. So I get that part. However, if you only test and you teach to the test and don't develop critical thinking skills, you don't develop like actual life skills, then what you have is a bunch of kids who can really, really take a test well, but can't actually apply anything. And so somehow I think that the struggle is always, how do you, develop enough metrics, right? Whether it's testing, whether it's questionnaires, whether it's just, other forms of assessment, without taking away from the actual teaching and learning that's supposed to happen. And I think that's where sometimes the government, the education system, even as individuals, we can sometimes fall short. Because honestly, the problem with it is, just to be quite frank, it takes more work, right? It's easier if you want to test how well like students are doing. The easier way is to give them a test at the end and see what do they make before and after, and see if they're doing better.
Listen to the vibes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. I have here Mr. Dr. A.D. Prewitt. Now, this man is very accomplished in a lot of things, and I'm going to let him tell a little bit about himself. So the floor is yours, sir.
Awesome. So how are you doing today?
Not too bad, not too bad.
All right. Well, I guess just to start off, my name is Dr. Anderson D. Prewitt. And a lot of times when I talk, I usually start with a little bit about my background or credentials, right? So Dr. Anderson D. Prewitt. It just so happens I'm the founder of a company called Prewitt Solutions, where we do technology consulting and sales. I have about actually 4 different engineering degrees. I have a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD in engineering. Mm-hmm. And basically, I've worked for a lot of different Fortune 500 companies and things like that over the years. I usually start with that, but then, especially when talking to students or just people in general, the other thing that I say is that even though I have 4 engineering degrees, I've actually failed quite a few classes, right? I've written grants and gotten money for my writing and all those things, but I've actually got many of them rejected, many publications and books and things like that. There's a lot of jobs I've applied for that I haven't gotten. And, quite honestly, I think one of the most interesting things is, and even in my book, I talk about it a little bit, even though I make my living doing science, technology, engineering, and math, I really don't like math that much. Never was a fan, quite honestly, right?
I hear you.
Right. But one thing I say is, math and really a lot of the science and things like that is just like anything else, right? Anyone who's really good at basketball didn't get that way just by only taking one shot and, oh, this is hard, and stopping, right? You get good at basketball by shooting free throws, by going to practice, by, practice, right? And so for me, I found math was the same thing. So since my, free throw wasn't that great, but I realized I could practice and my math skills could actually be better. And I realized how much you get paid and what you can do with it. That's kind of how I ended up being, kind of in my realm of working in education.
It's gone. It's froze. Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, there you are. Okay, we can keep going. I can always edit that out.
Yeah. Where did it stop? Cut off?
To be honest with you, once it stopped, I was kind of like, what do I do? So I don't remember where you left off.
Got you. Okay. Well, basically I'll start with my background, STEM education, just kind of go from there. So basically, even though I was never like an expert at math or never really liked it that much when I was a kid or in school, I realized that I could actually get paid for it and I could start having a career with it. And so because of that, I decided to practice and I worked hard and I was able to accomplish quite a bit using that skill. And so what it kind of helped to show me was that regardless kind of where you start or what you're doing, if you really, try, if you get mentors, if you really work hard at it, you can accomplish a lot. It's really just a matter of like knowing what you want to do and trying hard.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you said you wrote a book, right?
Correct. So the book I wrote is called STEM Navigators.
Okay.
Basically how to achieve success in science, technology, engineering, or math. Right. And essentially what the book is I wrote it with a collection of other people who actually have STEM degrees as well. And what we talk about is not so much just like what science, technology, engineering, and math is. We talk about that a little bit, but more so we each tell kind of stories about our personal journey from, wherever we began to attaining success in some, way using science, technology, engineering, and math in our education. And
Mm.
so some of the other people who were in the book and just tell some of the stories was one young lady started out, she was actually, an immigrant. She was always pretty good at math and stuff in high school, but her biggest fear on graduation wasn't where she was going to get a job. It was was she going to be able to stay in the country, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she went on to be a serial entrepreneur, and actually did, so well in school. She actually teaches STEM to other people now, right?
Oh, that's cool.
There was another young lady who actually was, an engineer, and she was actually a biomedical, scientist. She was doing biomedical engineering back before people really knew what it was. She always had to explain how biology and medicine and engineering, how they fit together, right? Extremely smart. I mean, she started businesses, she's worked for the government, she's worked in the private sector, all these great things. But she talked about the challenges of being a woman in STEM, and basically how there were a lot of men from other places who didn't think she was smart enough or could do it just because of her personal background, because she was a woman, And so a lot of that was interesting to me because even though I've had my own challenges, I've never had anybody think I couldn't do something because I was a woman, because obviously I'm a man, right? And
Right.
so just that type of, and even though I had known her for years, I didn't know that until we was writing the book and we talked about it. And so you don't always know what kind of challenges people go through to get to where they get to until you really start kind of digging deep. And so really the book, what it is a collection of these type of stories like that, telling people like how to get from A to B and where they've been through in their life, but also with some, like some laid out really good action steps for if you want to be successful, this is how you do it. So things like if you want to go to school and you want to go to school for free, here's how you get scholarships. If you need someone to write you a letter of recommendation, here's how you can do that, how you can approach that. Is there a formula for success? How can you do things? And even if you fail, how can you try again? And so we just try to encourage people through who are interested in like some kind of, degree or career in the sciences. It is possible for you, even if it doesn't seem like it right now. And that's kind of what the book is about.
So if I can ask a couple of questions, kind of sidetrack a little bit. I was reading a little bit of an article this morning about how important it was for people like in business and things like that to write books.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, in your experience, why do you feel like that would be an important thing to do?
Well, I think it's an important thing to do because, well, there's a couple of reasons. I think right now it's not only important, but it's easier than it's ever been, right? There's so much technology out there, both digital and just so many ways to get your message out there that it kind of is so easy. It's like, why not, right? But I think the main reason why it's important is because if you are a business person or you're doing anything, you've had some measure of success, there's probably other people who could benefit from your knowledge. Like mentoring is so important because it can save you so many steps, right? There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. And if you are good at what you do, someone else would like to learn that most likely. And so you can use those key concepts and that information. If you can basically take it and summarize it and put it into a book form, you can reach way more people than you could just talking to everybody individually.
And you talked about how it was a little bit more difficult for her being that she's a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know how you feel about this, but when people say that there's those roadblocks like that
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to whether it's your gender or your race or whatever, do you think it's more about your determination or really there's obstacles out there?
I think it's both, right? I mean, there's always the argument of like nature versus nurture, right?
Right.
There's a classic movie with Dan.
It stopped again. It stopped. It's like I can't hear anything. There we go.
All right, it's back.
Oh,
Awesome.
yes. Okay, there was a classic movie.
Okay, gotcha. Classic movie called Trading Spaces or Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd. And I think
Yes.
that when you looked at it, right, and I think it's a good example, but you see it in society, you see it everywhere else. There were some inherent, actual obstacles to them, doing what they wanted to do. When those obstacles were removed for whatever reasons, they both were able to achieve levels of success almost, equal. That being said, it still took work, effort, determination to get from A to B either way. Even at the end when they, the good guys won kind of thing, right? They had to work at it. And so I think in our society, you see the same thing, right? And I talk about it a little bit with, I do a lot of work in the nonprofit space, in economic development, things like that. And I think one thing that people kind of should kind of look at, right? I mean, it just so happens my background is systems engineering, and we talk about the system is broken and this is this and all these things. Well, in actuality, I think sometimes you have to understand that a lot of these things work together. So yes, there are some inherent roadblocks. There's, systemic issues, systemic inequalities, systemic racism, systemic sexism, all these things. And yes, there are some things that we as a community have to come together to do to fix that. That being said, it's still important for individual people to work hard to accomplish their goals. And really those two things have to happen in tandem, right? Like if you're successful and you've had a shot and you were able to do something, you have to reach back. You have to help somebody else get that shot because one, it's the right thing to do. But two, it actually reinforces and actually helps you both from a psychological and emotional level, but also from just a business level. And just to give you an example, and just being quite honest, for me, I started my own business. I've worked for people before, but I started my own company. One of the reasons that I first got jobs and contracts and was able to be successful was because people knew of me and knew my good work and knew I was a hard worker and good at what I was able to do. But I'll take it a step further. One thing that was able to kind of help me get beyond some of those structural hurdles was the fact that I was the person who people knew I was always giving back. I was always somewhere speaking to kids, or I was somewhere working with some nonprofit, or I was somewhere doing some community service.
I still can't hear you. There we go.
Okay. As a consequence of me being out and doing so much community service and things like that, a lot of people got to know me. And because they got to know me, they knew my good work, they knew of my effort. And also I met a lot of people who also were giving back and doing those things. And that gave me access and expanded my network and allowed me to actually, jump over some of those hurdles that were in the way, And so that's why I think it's important that regardless of where you are in life, you have to, if you really want to move forward, you really got to be willing to give back. And that's really the only way you can really kind of, achieve your real dreams, because one, collaboration, but also what you gain so much by working, by teaching, by helping other people. The aspects of mentoring can't be overstated, because every time you mentor someone else, it helps them, but it also helps you tremendously.
Oh, I've always believed that. That when I became a supervisor, that was one of my main goals, was making sure that I educated the people that were under me. That's the only way you seem to be able to step up, is if you bring people along, And I know I'm a little bit off track here, but we were talking before, my wife and I, about these hurdles, and one of them being our education system.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like when the high school level, you're kind of, I mean, not everybody, but a lot of people already kind of know what they want to do. And so they should have more programs out there. Like if you wanted to be a mechanic, or, whatever it might be, then your education from that point on should be geared more towards that, where you're not, I mean, don't get me wrong, math is very important. I think everybody should know how to, balance their checkbook, things like that. I feel history is important. You should know, all about where, you came from and everything else. But at the same time, I think the focus should be more on what you want to do. And I think kids would be more successful that way.
Absolutely.
The town next to us, they have a school that's pretty much like that. And if you qualify, you go to that school. And so these kids are like, they're so enthusiastic, and they're motivated, and they see a future ahead of them. My wife worked for the school district, and they went to one of these schools, and one of the classes that they had was for being chefs. And here's these kids, they were making stuff that you'd see Chef Ramsay make.
Right.
And they were watching all these people sitting around eating their food, and that was like the greatest thing that they could ever accomplish at that point. So, I don't know how you feel about that, but
Oh no. Well, it's funny. I would strongly agree, right? So one of the reasons why my book is called, Pathways to Achievement in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math is because I think that's important. Like there should be pathways. I think a lot of times where our education system on multiple levels fails, whether you're talking about K through 12 or even in college or whatever, is it's designed a certain way, right? And even though we say it's broken, it may be doing what it's designed to do. And quite honestly, I think a lot of times if you're looking for students to kind of have more options, I don't think that our education system always gives that to them in the right way, right? Because
Right.
if I'm a student, even if I'm, I advocate science, technology, engineering, and math. That's my thing, just because that's what I know. That being said, you know, that science, technology, engineering, and math are in so many different industries, right? So if you want to be a really good chef, most really good chefs can do math much better than me. Why? Because they no, literally, I like to cook, but that's the part that always throws me because converting measurements, just figuring out the size and shapes, like that's important. If you're doing construction, I have an uncle who does construction, again, does math way better than me. Why? Because he has to make sure that you measure, twice and cut it once, right?
Hmm.
And so I think that, it's really a combination of putting together your skills with your personality and what you enjoy, but there's no reason that you should be pigeonholed into one thing just because of, that's what your school is set up like, right? And so I think that the more options that you give kids and the more ways you can really find like, really off ramps, right? So let's say you design, in design and engineering, right? You design to a certain amount of parameters. So let's say we design, our schools so that every kid who wanted to could become a rocket scientist, right? That's, a lot of math, a lot of school and whatever else, or some kind of brain surgeon. That's fine. But as long as you have that design and within there are off ramps where it's like, you know what, I get to the 10th grade and realize, yeah, that, rocket science sounds cool, but actually I just want to work on the engines in the rockets. And maybe I don't need all this. I can go do that right now. Or I just want to do the programming part. Maybe there's an off ramp to go here. If I come change my mind, I can get back on. I think a lot of times there's these other barriers. We're talking about barriers, right? I think some of those barriers kind of come into play that we would rather not see, and they don't necessarily need to be there. And so I
Right.
think that if you have, can remove some barriers and give people more options, especially kids, but even adults, right? um, I think that you can really broaden the horizons of a lot of people who could really use a lot. And the reason I want to and just real quickly, the reason I said adults as well is because I do a lot of work in the area of STEM education. And there are a lot of programs, a lot of grants, a lot of things focused on not even high school, but they, say third grade or like really early, because they say if you get them early, get them interested, then that's the best way and they'll be interested for life. Maybe, maybe not. But okay, let's say you focus on the early ones. What happens to that high school student who just didn't know what he wanted to do, or just only discovered math or science or construction or whatever when they were in the 11th grade? Do you just give up on them?
No, no,
What do
no,
you do?
no.
Are there off ramps and chance for them as well? And the other thing I'll say, especially if you look at our economy and things today, you have millions of people without jobs. You have a global pandemic that's shifted our life, right? How are people who had one set of skills and now have to go back to school or get retrained or get learn something new? What about them? There may be a 55 or 60-year-old computer programmer that's about to be the new Steve Jobs, whoever it is, right? But if you say, oh, you're too old and you're exploring ageism, then what do we leave behind? Like, how many useful skill sets, useful information, useful people do we not include if we don't have options for them, regardless of where you are right now? And so I definitely would agree with you. Pathways are critical to educational success.
Yeah, I'm gonna make one more opinion before I jump off of that subject. But my problem is that, and I know it all has to do with government funding and things like that. They seem to focus more on passing these skills tests than they do actually teaching the kids things.
Yeah.
So, once again,
Yeah.
that's my opinion.
Well, what's funny is there's I mean that's your opinion, but your opinion happens to be right, in my opinion, right? Because I think that and it's a challenge. Like, so I do a lot of data science, and so having a test and using that's a great data point you can use to say, are you doing good, doing bad? And I think if you do just program with no kind of assessment or no kind of understanding, you never can really measure what you're doing. So I get that part. However, if you only test and you teach to the test and don't develop critical thinking skills, you don't develop like actual life skills, then what you have is a bunch of kids who can really, really take a test well, but can't actually apply anything. And so somehow I think that the struggle is always, how do you, develop enough metrics, right? Whether it's testing, whether it's questionnaires, whether it's just, other forms of assessment, without taking away from the actual teaching and learning that's supposed to happen. And I think that's where sometimes the government, the education system, even as individuals, we can sometimes fall short. Because honestly, it just, the problem with it is, just to be quite frank, it takes more work, right? It's easier if you want to test how well like students are doing. The easier way is to give them a test at the end and see they, what do they make before and after, and see if they're doing better. A more complicated way is actually give them maybe project-based learning where they're graded on a variety of things, or whether you're using some other kind of tools or metrics throughout the process. It takes more work on the back end to figure out how good or bad that was, but it doesn't mean it's not valuable. So it's just a matter of what's easy and what's not easy and who's willing to do it.
Yeah, my thing is I'm more apt to learn from hands-on. I can't read a book and learn that well. I have to actually put my hands on whatever it is that I'm trying to learn about. Unless it's history, I'm pretty good at that, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Oh, no,
So
but I think that the other thing too is, so one thing that I think happens a lot is that students we judge them too much when we talk about testing and stuff, right? So if you're a hands-on learner, right, where you got to touch stuff, that's perfectly fine. That's a whole, there's only so many learning types. That's one of them. The other one is an auditory learner, where you might have to hear it. Some people have to read it. Some people have to say it out loud. I'm one of those, I have to say it out loud to really get it, right? So I'm talking to myself all the time. People think I'm weird, but I'm just trying to understand, right? but that's because that's what works for me. And I think that a lot of times we don't necessarily look at it where, to the point I was making about the complexity, right? If we want to design something, say a test or a class or a course or curriculum that actually encompasses everybody, then I have to design it with all those things in mind. So I have to make something for you so it's hands-on. It has to be something for me so I can talk about it. It has to be something for somebody else who can hear it. And you have to put all those things in. Now, that's the best way to do it. The easier way, the cheap way, the quick way is just do one of them and keep it moving. And sometimes that's what you get.
Yeah, I hear you. So at what point in your life did you discover that you wanted to do what you're doing right now, the whole science, technology, and engineering?
Yeah, I think probably when I was a kid. I think I was one of those who had I was a goofy kid, so I probably I used to love reading like comic books. So anything like sci-fi, comic books, X-Men, whatever, that was my jam. That was me, right? So I if I'm probably being honest, I'm pretty sure man, if I go do one of these science things, maybe I can get some of these, maybe I can be an astronaut, get these Fantastic Four powers, or I can go to the lab and get some Spider-Man powers. I'm pretty sure that was in there somewhere at some point in time. I think what kind of kept me in it was two things. One, I just found it interesting, right? It was one of those things where I realized as I had opportunities to take classes and, play with things, I realized I liked it, right? And for instance, I think one of the things I always talk about is the fact that I don't think it's good to try to judge a book by its cover when you're talking about students who may do science or math or may do anything, or who may go on whatever else, because I definitely did not fit the bill when I was a very young kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reason I got into computers wasn't because, I just wanted to program computers and be built. I didn't want any of that. I wanted to play video games, and that's what I liked. And so I'm old enough that when I was playing video games, I was playing them on a computer, and they had a computer lab. We were supposed to be taking, I think, a typing class, and I can still barely type, right? But what I did learn how to do was I learned from a friend of mine how to essentially hack, right? Or use some code to open up a separate window on the computer so we typing on and play video games on it. So we'd all sit in the back of the class and we're playing video games and shoot each other and doing all this stuff while everybody else, keys is moving. They're like, wow, they must be some really good students. They're always typing in there, whatever. And we're gonna playing video games. And that's how I really got into computers. I'm like, oh, how can you do this? How can I do this? And that was it, right? And so I think it's hard to try to track what's the normal path kind of thing. Because I think a lot of times it starts with, oh, you like this, and then once you realize, behind it, oh, wait, if I learn this, I can do more of this. Let me do that. Oh, I can do this. Let me do that. And the second reason, honestly, was purely monetary. just to be quite frank, because once I got into college, I got into the engineering programs and all those things, and I realized that hey, if I go into this engineering program, I can get my degree for free, and they will actually pay you to go to school for these type of degrees. So I didn't know that it's so crazy. I didn't know that there was such a thing as unpaid internships, because in the in the sciences, a lot of classes I was taking, if you got an internship, you can pay like you were, like I said, like a grown man, right? Because at the time I was like maybe 18, I was still like half a kid, let's be real, whatever, right? But I'm taking like a math class, and you go off, and 2 summers later, you're working like Procter Gamble, one of these big companies that's paying you like a real $20 an hour, something like that. When you're used to making like maybe you're making 6.5, Michael Florida or something. It's like, this is pretty cool, and you can make enough on one summer internship to pay for your whole next semester. And so when I realized that, like, okay, those are options just while you're in school. Wait a minute, what kind of money do they make when you get out of school? What kind of opportunities you get doing this? And so the only reason I wound up kind of still going to get a PhD is because every time I finished my bachelor's and was like, well, hey, we have this scholarship here, and I mean, if you want, we can give you some money if you want to take some more classes. I'm like, give you money just to take some more classes. I mean, I'm used to taking classes, so sure, why not? And then I go get some more internships, learn some more stuff, and it just kind of kept escalating. And then turn around, I got a PhD kind of thing, right? And I won't, I'm not gonna lie and say like getting a PhD is easy or anything like that, but it's one of those things where after going through all the other ones, it was like, why not? Because you realize that, and I tell anybody this: if I can get a PhD, anybody can get a PhD. Let's be real. I just wanted to just, I was not your best student. Like, I was an undergrad for a long time. It took me about 5 years to get an undergrad. I had a lot of fun, but I was there for a long time, right? So, and that's just being honest. But eventually, I wound up getting out of school, getting my degree, whatever. But I wouldn't have been able to if I hadn't had the financial support that came with majoring in these types of technical areas. And also, I wouldn't have had to drive to, did I not know that there was, other benefits that came afterwards, and there were so many more opportunities because, as
I can see you.
okay, you still can't hear me?
There you are. Now I can
Yeah,
hear you.
great, gotcha. Yeah. So, engineering degrees. So as someone who has like all these engineering degrees, especially with a PhD, there's a lot of different ways I could essentially make money to support myself, my family, and everything else. I mean, I can teach classes pretty much anywhere. Even if it's not a super engineering class, I've taken so many math. I can teach math anywhere you want me to. It really doesn't matter. I don't like it, but I can teach it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can write grants. I can still do research and get paid to research and do interesting things, and I can write grants and get somebody to pay me to do that. I can usually, I've worked in education and worked in STEM, and I've taught class, so I can work in education. I can develop programming, both for a university or a school or somewhere else. So I can write my own grants and develop my own programs to do stuff in the community or for a specific task or do training for other people. Because a lot of this stuff that I know from an engineering standpoint, I can train other people who need to know that, whether in the corporate world or the private sector or the public sector or wherever. Coming through?
Now, yeah, there you are.
Okay. Yeah. And in addition to all that, I can run my own company. So basically I can, run a business, I can work for myself, I can do consulting. And those are just some of the options. I can write books, whatever. But all those kind of pathways, the reason I can do that is because of, my life experience, but also because of things I learned while getting my degrees.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So you've gone from company to company to company, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming a lot of it had to do with a little bit of the money, but whatever other decisions that those were. Hey, I've changed jobs just because I wanted to get away from the place I was at. So.
Oh yeah. Let's be clear. And I mean, I think it's a combination. Sometimes there was things I took just for like, I needed to check, right? But I think, the more you kind of go through, a lot of it was because of like, at a certain point in life, you got to decide, do you want more money or do you want more meaning, right? So at a
Yes.
certain point, it's like, okay, this job can give me a whole lot of money, but it really wouldn't mean much to me. I'd be miserable every day and I wouldn't like that, right? I could do this over here. I may get a little less money or I may have to, struggle a little bit, but it'll mean so much more when I can do this and say, this is what I did. Is that better?
There we go.
Okay. So yeah, so sometimes you got to make a decision and choose between more money or more meaning, right? So I can
Hmm.
work all these jobs and really, really enjoy what I'm doing, or I can work a job, be miserable, and make way more money, you know. But I
True.
think it's really up to the person. You got to find that balance between what you want. And so for me, a lot of my decisions, especially in this point in my life, have been around like, what's going to make me happy, right? Obviously, I want to make enough, money and have enough to have a certain measure of success to be happy, to be comfortable, right? But it's also very important for me that I have I'm able to spend time with my family and maybe just have my friends. So, for example, right now, my business, Prewitt Solutions, the reason I started it was because I was good at something and people asked me to do it. And so I was like, eventually somebody was like, hey, you should start a company and get paid for that. And I was like, okay. Um, the company has evolved. And so now I'm not even working as much in the day to day. I kind of do other stuff separately, just that I enjoy. But, Prewitt Solutions is still a company that does software and technology sales. It does, you still do a little bit of consulting, and a lot of, provide a lot of services to companies and businesses and people who need those. And why that's great for me is because the entire business can be run remotely. Like I don't have to be in an office at any point in time, um, because, as long as I have access to email and hopefully a good internet connection, I'm good to go, you know.
Gotcha.
Um, and that's pretty much the only things that really, kind of are the main limiting factors for me, you know.
Mm.
But yeah, so that's kind of why, I had to make those choices, in life to figure out what was best for me.
And talk about your importance of giving back to the community.
Yeah, I think it's important for a couple ways. So one, I mean, I live there, right? Like, I mean, so
Of
you want
course.
to make sure that where you're living is cool, but also you want to make sure the people who live around you are doing well. So in my area of town I live in, it's pretty nice, and I like it, and a lot of people like it. But in that same town, there are other areas that aren't necessarily so nice, but they got a lot of nice people, you know. So how can you make sure that you can give to both places, that you can be happy and they can be happy and everybody can be happy? It's about going out and serving as many people as you can, both as a business owner, but also in the community. Like I work with community groups. I do a lot of speeches and work with like school kids. I donate money, and really a lot of times I donate a lot of my time, and sometimes that's volunteering with my special skill set at certain places. Like at my church, I kind of help them build their whole digital infrastructure, right? So everything's from their streaming to their email accounts to all that kind of stuff. I kind of help them do that because I had that skill set. You know, I work with other nonprofits and community groups to help them develop programming for kids or for the community, around like teaching people stuff, whether it's education training, whether it's job skills, whatever. And I do it not necessarily because I get compensated, because I have the time to give back, I have the skill sets, and because it helps people. And that's something that's important to me and something I like to do. So if I can spend my time doing more of that, I try to, because I enjoy it, but I also know I get a chance to see in real time like the impact, that it makes. So
Right.
that's why I like going out and speaking. Like I love talking to people because I get a chance to see, just sharing a couple of those, nuggets that I know and just the stuff I've been through. Some people find it useful information. And that's pretty cool because it's just like, these are just stories. Like I was just like, I mean, you want to know, I'll tell you, right? But if that information can actually help somebody to not have to do the same dumb stuff I did, or it can help them find some measure of success, that's a win.
For sure. One of the things that I've always said is you sow those seeds, and then later on you may or you may not see what's grown from that.
Yeah.
But every once in a while you'll get that, somebody will say, hey, you told me this a long time ago, or you taught me this, and now this is what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
I can only count on one hand how many times that's happened, but those few times have meant everything in the world to me.
Yeah. I think it's crazy, especially now, like, being I'm a data scientist, right? I look at, there's so much good and bad with social media, right? And everything that kind of comes with it. I
Hmm.
get that. But for this part of the conversation, we just focus on some of the good parts. I think one of the things that, happens with it is that socialization, right? Think of where we're at right now, right? As soon as COVID-19 hit, we're in a global pandemic. You can't even hug your grandma, you can't even see your friends. That's a huge, big thing. But think about the other side of it, where it happened now versus 5 or even 10 years ago, even a couple years ago. there's more ways and more opportunities now to still connect with people, even if you can't do it physically, right? And so now you can still, between the LinkedIn's, the Facebook, the social medias, the Google Hangouts, the Zooms, and all these other platforms, you can still kind of see them and interact, even if you can't do it physically. You can still get in contact with people who you might normally see at a trade show or a conference, or when you're visiting someone. Now you may be able to see them online or find them on LinkedIn or Facebook or one of these things. And so that provides so much opportunity to really, make stronger, deeper connections with people, even if you can't do it in the same physical space. And so it's different, not necessarily better, but it can still be good. And it's all a navigating process. We're all trying to kind of learn at the same time. But I think that's one of the cool things about technology, right, is the fact that it can give opportunity. And obviously it's like, the Spider-Man thing, right? Great power comes with great responsibility, right?
Exactly.
So it can be used for good or for evil. But when we use it intentionally for good things, there's so much that we can do when we do it together.
True. Can you imagine if this had happened pre-internet times?
Yeah. So it's funny. I'm in a lot of groups and think tanks to talk about this type of stuff. And we were talking about how for all the, bad that's happened and how, horrible it is kind of thing, how much worse would it have been? How much worse could it have been had we not had so many things like the internet, whatever else? Because it's very possible we might not even if we, we could have had more information sooner about it, than we did. It would have still taken much, much longer to know about it in the way we had we not had the internet and had all these things in place already. So
Exactly.
It's just one of those things where it's like you have to kind of, be, mindful of the role things like technology have played in making it to the fact that we're able to still kind of, survive and kind of get, figure out the next steps kind of thing. Technology has had a huge part to play in that.
For sure. Okay, so I've read your bio, and I know you've been a lot of places, a lot of different countries doing motivational speaking. Please, I've got to know about these experiences.
Okay. So it's funny. Like I remember one time when I was actually talking and it's still weird. I'll be honest, still weird hearing like that I'm a motivational speaker. And it was so funny. My wife even told me about it one time because I speak so many places. And when I first started speaking, I was never a good speaker. Like I still have a speech impediment, right? And so sometimes if I get too excited when I'm talking, it's called cluttering, right? So my words will clutter, and I get real. So I got to slow down and like breathe and talk, and it takes a minute, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I've had all my life. And so I was nervous. I was nervous as hell the first time I really, really had to like speak. I remember the first time I had to give a speech somewhere.
Cut out again. All right, there we go.
Okay. Yeah. So
I did it again. It cut out again.
can you hear me now?
Okay, I can hear you.
Okay, awesome. So I remember the first time I had to give a speech when I was like in high school, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was in front of the whole auditorium, and all the students were there, and I was so nervous, right? That fortunately they had one of these big like podium things that went all the way down to the floor.
Mm-hmm.
My leg was shaking, like it was like beating the back of the thing like ridiculously, but you couldn't see it, right? So I was just sitting there like this, the whole leg was shaking, and I was talking from here up. I'm just doing my thing, but I was so nervous, and I was a pool of sweat, whatever. And everyone's like, "Oh, you did so great." I was like, I was so focused that I wind up actually speaking slower than I normally do, paying more attention. And I think, and even when I was in college, the first time I had to speak somewhere, I was still nervous and whatever, but I wind up just having to do it for random reasons. Sometimes because I do engineering, I had to do presentations for class, or I had to do this, and it was like, I'll just say it. And I never realized I was actually getting better at speaking to people about stuff in general, right? Even I give an example, in the engineering programs, there are a lot of international students, and people from all walks of life, everywhere there. And one of the things I got feedback about was it was like, Anderson, you present so well. And I was like, me, for real, because they say like, I seemed so confident when I would talk, and so I got such a presence. And I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, I'm just trying to get through it. But as I got more comfortable with it, then what happened was I was able to speak to more and more audiences, different audiences. And just by the nature of being able to kind of, convey a message to people and a lot of different types of people, then it became easier to convey different types of messages. And so I'd be getting called and asked to speak to people who not necessarily about just the stuff that I thought I was the quote unquote expert in. Like I know I'm an expert in like this science stuff, so I can talk about that. Well, people are like, hey, can you just come and talk to my class about science? Nah, I just talk to them. What do you mean? No. So I just be like, okay, didn't I just tell them some cool stuff? I'm like, I don't know any cool stuff, but I'll tell them about me, or I'll try to tell them a good story. I'll try to say something nice, whatever. And eventually I found out that those things I was telling them, that little information happened to be motivational. And so I was literally in a talk somewhere, and I'll never forget this. I was sitting there and people asking me questions. They were like, okay, anybody have any questions about our presenter? We're talking about what's going on and how you can do your thing. Because I was just talking to them about, like, I think STEM and how to get scholarships. But as part of like telling them to get scholarships, this is a school that not many people come and talk to them about scholarships to go and get a degree and be a rocket scientist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I'm talking to them the same way I talk to people that when I'm talking at, like, MIT or Georgia Tech or, China or there, I talk the same way. You get it like I give it to you. I already got a speech impediment. I'm not going to change it that much. That's what I do, right? So I'm talking to them like, hey, I can do it. Anybody can do it. Let's go. Why can't you do it? I don't care where you're from. Let's do this, right? And so during some of the questions I thought it was going to be technical questions about how to get a scholarship or how to fill this out, whatever. Somebody asked me, hey, when did you become such a great motivational speaker? And I was like, I'm a motivational speaker? Me? Really? I motivate people? I was like, it blew my mind. I couldn't really fathom it. And I think that was like when it hit me, like, oh, I guess maybe it is kind of motivational. And a lot of it was just kind of understanding that, once I was able to clearly convey, a message, it was just a matter of like making sure that the message was something that would actually help people and knowing how to do that. And that's kind of how it really got me started on the whole motivational speaking, talking everywhere path.
Okay, well that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very important that people remember that when you go out and you talk to people, you talk to everybody the same anyway. That's the way you
Yeah.
should be. You
Yeah.
know, don't just, it's like when I first got together with my wife. It's kind of a weird example, but I'll tell you about it. Um, Her cousin, he's he has a mental problem,
Mm.
and I want to say mentally handicapped because he's far beyond being stupid, but
Mm.
he's kind of slow,
Mm.
and so I meet him, and she's just giving him hell the whole time, right? Teasing him about this, that, and the other,
Mm.
and I'm like, aren't you being kind of mean? And she goes, I'm treating him like I would anybody else. Why not? I'm like, you're absolutely right. Why should I treat him any different? And so I gave him a hard time all the time too, and he gives it right back to me. Did I lose you?
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay.
We're not toward the end, yeah. But nah, that's real. I mean, I think that so it's funny. My mom actually taught special education when I was a kid, right? One of the reasons why I decided to go and stay in school and get a PhD and I wanted to teach some is because, getting to meet some of the kids that was like in my mom's class really like changed my perception, what you think when you think of some kids like, special needs or whatever it is. Because there were a lot of kids that unfortunately, again, this goes back to our broken educational system, right? There were a lot of kids who would wind up in these special needs classes or the special attention, as then some of them again didn't have any necessarily. Some of them had like certain mental challenges and things like that. Some of them had no mental challenges; they just had challenges with school, and some of it was because they were poor or they were hungry or they just didn't have the resource they needed, and so because of that, they wind up getting shifted off to a class that would give them more time because they weren't. They would say he didn't know how to read when in actuality he was too hungry to focus on the books right now.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so I think that for me was one of the things that kind of changed my perceptions of like what a special needs person is, because you never know what anybody's situation is. And if you treat everybody the same, then you get to experience so many different people in the same, a really genuine way. And I think that's
Exactly.
one of the things. I think that, the one thing that I guess bothers me when I see people who go out and say they speak into people and they just to get the check or whatever else is, I don't think you can really do a job like that or really go be a speaker without, you got to have empathy. Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Okay, now I can hear
Coming
you.
through? Yeah. But yeah, you got to have empathy. Like, you really have to be able to empathize with your audience or whoever you're talking to. Otherwise, whatever you say is going to just ring hollow.
True. Well, yeah, if you don't care about who you're talking to, then you might as well be talking to the wall.
Yeah, but you would be surprised. Like, and I've seen it, and I'm not even gonna say just in terms like the motivational speaking industry or that, but even like in schools, right? One of the reasons why I wrote my book and why I do so much work in the area of STEM is because I've seen especially when you do these science classes or these technology classes, where there are people who are like, feel like they should be gatekeepers and they really don't care about students. They're just there. They care about their research or about their next grant or about something that's not teaching students, right?
Exactly.
And so because of that, what happens, especially when you get to the college level and sometimes even the high school level, they're only focused on the test versus how the students are doing, is you get these really poor outcomes that get blamed on, oh, well, these students or this group of students doesn't deserve to be there, or they don't know this stuff, or they're never going to get it. And then you have this segregation and segmentation, when the reality is that if you treat everyone the same and you give everybody a shot, then you never know who can and who can't until they try. And that's kind of my biggest thing about why that's so important, is because you have to really be able to give everybody access and everybody opportunity to get a
Oh, yeah.
chance. You know.
Well, you when you talk to people, I mean, granted, like if you were to sit here and try to explain, any kind of science or technology to me, I'm just going to sit there, dumbfounded. But I mean, if you treat me like a man and you explain it to me in terms that I would understand, well, that's a different thing. I mean, that's
Very much so.
you have to know who you're talking to, you know.
So the best advice I think I got when I was working on my PhD was actually from my advisor at the time. And he told me, like, hey, you need to be able to explain any of these scientific concepts you're talking about to at least two different audiences, right? So one should be somebody who's like a super technical person who probably knows more than you about it. You need to be able to explain whatever scientific thing you're talking about in terms they understand. But when you make that presentation or that paper that explains to them, it needs to also be something that your mom can read, or somebody from your neighborhood who hadn't been to these schools and just, decides to read something. And to this day, if you ask my mom, she can tell you what my dissertation was about, right?
Nice.
I forget sometimes, and she's still like, "Oh yeah, you did the stuff on the stuff." I'm like, "Oh, I did do that." Oh, right. But you know, but the reason for that, and actually, I think Shakespeare really was a master at this, right? Shakespeare, one of the reasons his stuff was so popular, he would talk to all the rich people and poor people at the same time. He would talk to the upper class and he would talk to the peasants, and in his plays, you had stuff that spoke to both classes and both people. So everybody was like, "This is really cool." And so I think to a certain extent, when I look at at science and things, I look at it the same way, where it's like, okay, can I make sure this is technical enough to satisfy whatever technical requirements? It doesn't break down. It's a good, thing. But can I explain it in a way that makes sense to somebody who hadn't been to school as long as I have, or who just needs to know about it? And if you can't do both those things, you might not understand it well enough.
Dude, I used to work in the water department.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, they sent us to a class, and because you have to keep up so many hours to keep your licenses and things
Yep.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they send me to this water law class.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not kidding you. Water law. All right, it was already going to be a boring class, but this guy is talking to me like I'm a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you might as well be speaking Latin because I didn't understand it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was almost like the old Charlie Brown cartoons when you hear the teachers or adults wah, wah, wah. That was the way it was the whole time. I mean, this guy could have bored a rock. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't speak above me, but don't speak below me either.
Yeah. Just speak to the person. That helps.
Exactly. And then, when you couldn't answer a question, he'd look at you like you were stupid. And I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not stupid. I may not be the brightest bulb on the tree, but I'm far from being stupid.
Yeah. So here's what's funny about that to me, right? One thing I realized, especially after it happened while I was getting my PhD, but also definitely after I got it, right? A couple things happened. So one, you realize, especially depending on what school you go to and what program, whatever, sometimes people with their PhDs, there's a certain amount of ego that may come with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you define yourself fully and solely by having your PhD, then they're the ones who like, you call me Dr. So-and-so. I'm so PhD or so-and-so MD. And that's the only way you can even, relate to them. I mean, I'm Dr. Anderson Prewitt, but I'm just Anderson, right? I have so many other things about me that I feel are interesting. That's just one of them. So that's one thing. But I think the other, problem with it is people who are really good at it, and you'll see this a lot of times if you go to, and you'll see the difference in a lot of universities, some of the most, whether they're prestigious or just the ones who are really doing good stuff. The universities are just kind of like, so. You'll see them interact with their students in a certain way because they're like, oh, you don't deserve to be here. Call me Dr. So-and-so, that's it, whatever. And they're grad students, and that's how they try to put themselves on a pedestal. You go to like an MIT, go to these Harvards, go to these any top tier schools. Most of them, they don't even refer to the doctor. They're like, hey, Rob, hey, Jimmy, hey, John. And they have students, hey, just call me Bob. That's how, because it's like, okay, you're here, you're smart. Why do we have to stand on airs and on ceremony, right? And so it's not, no one wants to spend their time talking down or sharing how much knowledge, how much I think I know. It should be about how can we make sure that I'm, giving you what you need, right? How can we make sure that we're sharing information together? Because regardless of who you are, anybody with a PhD, you don't know everything. You may know everything about one subject over here, but you don't know everything. And here's the trick. Most PhDs are very, 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 very good at their thing. And some of them are very laser focused on that, which is great. It's how you get a PhD. The problem with that is if you try to apply that to everything, and if you watch, a lot of times people with PhD will. And sometimes you can. Sometimes you can apply one thing. Like I know a little bit about material science. You can talk about material science for a lot of things, from cell phones, computers, to, construction, to whatever, right? But at the same time, I don't try to, overplay my hand where it's like, yeah, let's talk about the material science of playing cards. So I'm an expert at poker. It's not that straightforward, but what you'll see is people try to do that sometimes, just try to put themselves on a pedestal. And that I think becomes really unnecessary if you're, the only time you really see a lot of people who are kind of insecure with their own, intellectual achievements, I guess.
Yeah, ego is one of the biggest problems I think we have in the world today. Yeah. I appreciate that sentiment from it because, you saying, you call me Anderson or whatnot, but personally, and this is just because of the way I was raised, I mean, you earned that title as doctor, so I'm going to refer to you as that, even though you wouldn't correct me if I just said, hey, Anderson, how you doing? Not a lot of people are that way, but I try to give as much respect as I can,
Oh no, I appreciate it. And let's be clear. I'm not, I have a little bit of ego too. I'm human, right? But I mean, but I think the biggest thing is though, it's like some people are unnecessary, right? Like if I'm in a setting where, okay, I need to, we're going to grant or we're all acknowledging people like, okay, I'll say, yeah, I'm Dr. Prewitt. I'll raise my hand. It's whatever, right? But I don't need to go to the bar. We're having a drink. Like, yeah, oh, Dr. Prewitt, let me get a drink for him. Like that's dumb. I'm not going to write on my Starbucks thing, Dr. Anderson D. Prewitt on my Starbucks cup, right? And I think that's where some people get like a little extra with it. But for me, I think that part of knowledge is understanding that you don't know everything, right? So I kind of walk into I always say, people kind of laugh, but like my goal when I go places, I always try to be the dumbest person in the room whenever I can help it, right? Because if you go somewhere and you're always around, you feel like you're the smartest person in the room, then you're never gonna learn anything. You're never gonna get better.
That's
and
true.
Generally, wherever I go, and it's not necessarily because I hang around with only PhDs or only people that got all these degrees. But generally, if I'm in a room, somebody knows something I don't know, and I want to talk to them and find out. So, hey, what's that Tell me about it. I want to learn. And if you don't kind of keep that mindset, then you get real stagnant.
True.
And I don't like being stagnant.
True. Now, if I go to Starbucks, my name is either McLovin or Carlo Spicy Wiener. So.
Honestly, that'll help you get your order right. I mean, that's actually a pretty good move.
As a matter of fact, if I call you and you have caller ID, it says McLovin on it. So.
Oh wow.
Nobody can steal that, by the way. That's mine.
Hey, you got it.
So, what have you got going on like right now?
Oh man, a couple things. So right now, obviously we talked a little bit about the book, STEM Navigators: Pathways to Achievement in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, available on Amazon or STEMnavigators.com. That's the website. My business, we've actually been pretty busy. We were fortunate because even with all the stuff going on, we've actually been busier because a lot of the stuff at Prewitt Solutions, PrewittSolutions.com, we actually sell a lot of the equipment that people need right now to work remotely. So everything from computers to software like Office and Google platform and WebEx and all those kind of things. We sell that and help people figure out how to use it. So that's something we've been pretty busy with. And outside of that, if you just go to my website, dradprewitt.com, you can find out pretty much whatever's going on with me. So right now I'm getting ready. I'm working with a couple different nonprofits, putting together a couple different virtual conferences. Because of everything going on, a lot of, conferences got canceled, right? So I still work with some nonprofits. Like literally this week, when we get off of this later, I think Friday, I'm moderating a conference for the American Society of Engineering Education. I'm a moderator for one of their talks. The National Society of Black Engineers has a conference in August of this year, and I'm actually helping them coordinate some of that, as well as planning for a conference next year in March for that same organization. Plus a couple of other things in the community. Really, the biggest thing I've been looking at now is working with a couple of different groups, really trying to look at some of the issues that you've seen over the past, probably a month or so when you had all the stuff between George Floyd and the, social unrest and things like that. One thing that everybody's kind of come to terms with and agrees on is there's some systemic issues in our society, right? In terms of social justice, in terms of like our, economics, in terms of everything else. So from my perspective, when people talk about the system is broken and there are issues with the system, well, I'm a systems engineer, right? Is there something we can do about that? So part of what we were looking at is working with different people in a multitude of areas, and from economics to, law to social justice to just engineering and stuff, to look at how can we be innovative, right? What can we do to look at these structural inequalities and really take an innovative approach? And if there's a system that's, designed to perform poorly, you call an engineer to fix that or to redesign the system. And so I'm an engineer. I know engineers. We're doing that. And so I'm working with a bunch of different groups to kind of look at how can we really look at innovation and look at not just one system, whether it's, social justice, racial, whatever else. How can we look at it as an economic ecosystem, right? How does the socio-economic ecosystem work where all these things work together, where the education system and the legal system and our monetary system and our business and medical system, how do we put all those together and make them work for the good of everybody? Because one thing you've seen is between COVID and rioting and everything else, you've seen breakdowns in almost every institutional system that we have. Yeah. And so I'm working to try to figure out what are ways to fix that.
Well, I mean, that's very noble. I mean, a lot of people would just say, you know what, I'm staying up in my house and you just do whatever you want to do and, burn it all down for all I care,
Yeah, but I've been in the house for a while now though, so I'm trying to get out. Quarantine, I gotta get out the house. So hey, might as well try to fix it, right?
That's right. Well, and granted, I just do a podcast, but I felt like positivity is needed in this world so badly.
Yeah.
And anyone that can give that, little bit of ray of hope, motivation, who knows, there might be a kid out there that listens to this and says, you know what, that's what I want to do, or I should be motivated to try to get, into college and, get these degrees and maybe keep getting another degree or, whatever it is. Just, I don't want to see anybody lose hope, because there is hope.
Yeah, and one thing, and this is just, I mean, I would push back a little bit. I mean, I think the fact that you're doing a podcast is incredibly important. One, just the fact of the consistency that it takes to actually do it regularly, and the fact you're actually focusing on positive stuff. We really need that right now, yes. Right? Because I think that, so one thing, right? I mean, we've seen a lot of bad stuff. We've seen the rioting, we've seen looting, we've seen people dying, we've seen all this stuff in the streets. One thing that I think is, that I think somebody said was like, if you're going to look at like the positives of it, is you're seeing, especially like the younger people, like the youth, the millennials are really like Gen Z, they're really, marching, and the ones who are doing peaceful protests are in the streets saying they want to see change, and they're really engaged and involved. And I think that they wouldn't be there if they didn't have hope. Mm-hmm. And the thing about it is, for this generation, the way they get their information, the way they learn stuff and get, basically to hope is by digital means. So it's social media, it's the Facebook and Instagram, it's also like podcasts and things like this. So what you do to get the word out and just get good positive stuff out to the masses is hugely important, especially right now. And I mean, we really need that, because I think, the lack of hope is really one of the saddest and most like challenging things that, we could deal with. And so anybody who's willing to fight the good fight and say like, hey, let's be happy. Let's have some good vibes and do that. That's a wonderful and great thing. And I commend you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So one last time before we leave, do you have social media or websites you'd like to mention one more time?
Yes. So my social media is at Dr. A.D. Prewitt, DRADPREWITT. And that's for, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. You can hit me up on any of those. My website is dradprewitt.com. That's my website with most of my most important stuff. If you go to PrewittSolutions.com, that's where you can get any kind of, technology, hardware.
That again. This thing keeps freezing up. It stopped again.
Oh.
I got about as far as you were about to tell me about your website. And it stopped again.
All right, how's that? Is that better?
There we go. There we go.
All right.
You just want me to work hard. That's what it is tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm trying to stress the website. I do apologize. You know the funniest part, because this is like my normal setup. We literally was working because I'm literally in my niece's closet. Like when we get through, I'll show you around. Right, this is like her closet where her play clothes. And so we worked right. My wife got me all set up and everything. And the only thing was we didn't really test the connection like I thought we did. So that's my bad. But all right, I'm gonna do one more time. I'll start with the website you said.
Yes, please. That's
okay.
where I think that's where we left off.
Okay. So if you want to find out about me, my website is dradprewitt.com, dradprewitt.com. If you want to see my business or you need anything in terms of technology, hardware, software, anything like that, PrewittSolutions.com. You can find me there. And if you just want to see something about my book or interest in like STEM education, STEM Navigators, Pathways to Achievement in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, it's available on Amazon.com, or you can go to my website, stemnavigators.com, and find it there.
So what I'll ask is if you will please send me all the links.
I will do that.
And I will put those up on our posts and YouTube and all that good stuff.
Okay.
And
I'll send it to you today after.
Appreciate that. And I want to personally say thank you for taking the time to be on our show and showing a little bit of positivity. And also want to thank everybody that's been watching or listening. Continue to come back. We always have great people like Dr. Prewitt here. And we just want to bring you the best that we can to keep some motivation and some hope going. So take care.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network